My aunt is no longer capable of operating Whitaker Landing safely. Grant Vail said it into a microphone with the calm of a weather report. Across the hearing room, harbor officials looked toward me. Reporters lifted their phones. My niece, Elise, sat beside him, refusing to meet my eyes. Grant placed a signed statement on the clerk's desk. It described forgotten inspections, confused instructions, and a diesel spill he claimed I had caused by opening the wrong fuel control valve. Then he asked the Annapolis Harbor Safety Commission to suspend my operator's license, appoint him emergency manager, and approve the sale of the marina my husband and I had spent 40 years building. I did not interrupt him. I did not defend myself. When Commissioner Brooks asked whether I had anything to submit, I rose, carried a sealed Coast Guard evidence bag to the clerk, and placed it beside Grant's statement. Then I looked directly at him. "Before they give you my harbor," I said, "you should explain why your insurance claim was written 6 hours before the spill began." For the first time that morning, Grant stopped smiling. If you have ever been dismissed because of your age, or watched someone mistake patience for weakness, tell me where you are listening from. And if you believe the truth eventually surfaces, no matter how carefully people try to sink it, stay with me. My name is Eleanor Whitaker, though everyone in Annapolis calls me Nora. I was 69 years old when my own family tried to take my marina away. For 38 years, I investigated marine insurance claims along the Chesapeake Bay. I examined burned engine rooms, flooded hulls, staged collisions, falsified maintenance records, and accidents that were not accidents at all. Fraud is rarely exposed by one spectacular mistake. Usually it is something small, a rope tied with the wrong knot, an invoice dated before the damage, a captain who remembers the wind but forgets the tide. My late husband, Samuel, used to say I could smell a false claim before the paperwork reached my desk. He was exaggerating. Samuel and I built Whitaker Landing on 6 neglected acres at the edge of Annapolis Harbor. When we bought the property, the docks leaned, the repair shed had holes in its roof, and the fuel tank failed its first inspection. We rebuilt it one piling, one slip, and one loan payment at a time. By the time Samuel died 5 years ago, Whitaker Landing had 120 slips, a working repair yard, 2 service boats, a fuel dock, and 32 employees who depended on it. After the funeral, people urged me to sell. I refused. The marina was not a monument to grief. It was alive. Engines coughed awake before sunrise. Charter captains argued over bait prices. Mechanics shouted across the repair shed. Gulls stole sandwiches from tourists who should have known better. Every ordinary sound reminded me that Samuel and I had built something larger than ourselves. Elise understood that once she was my younger sister's daughter. When Elise was 11, her mother died from a brain aneurysm. Her father had disappeared years earlier, so Samuel and I brought her into our home. I packed her lunches, sat through school plays, taught her to drive in the empty marina parking lot, and paid for college. I never called her my daughter because I did not want to erase her mother. But in my heart, that was what she became. Then she married Grant Vail. Grant was polished in a way that made ordinary people feel slightly unfinished. He wore tailored jackets, remembered everyone's name, and spoke about waterfront development as though luxury hotels were acts of public service. He called himself a redevelopment consultant. His specialty, he said, was helping family properties modernize without losing their identity. For the first 2 years, I liked him. He never pressured me openly. He asked careful questions about insurance premiums, dock occupancy, environmental regulations, and the commercial loan on the repair yard. When I hesitated, he smiled and said he only wanted to protect what Samuel and I had created. The first crack appeared on a Monday morning in late September. I arrived at the marina just after 6. Fog lay low across the water, softening the boats into gray silhouettes. Colin Mercer, my operations manager, was outside the repair shed speaking with 2 men in navy jackets. One held a laser measuring device, the other was photographing the shoreline. Colin ended the conversation the moment he saw me. "Who are they?" I asked. "Property assessment team," he said too quickly. "For what property?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "Grant scheduled them. Just a valuation update." I looked toward the men. One was measuring the service road. The other had moved beyond the fuel dock and was photographing our oldest storage building. A valuation update did not require measurements of redevelopment access. Why didn't anyone tell me? Colin gave me a reassuring smile that did not belong on his face. Grant said Elise approved it. They're only collecting information, nothing binding. Nothing binding. In my old profession, that phrase usually meant someone had already prepared a document they did not want you to read. I told the men to stop until I received a written explanation. They packed their equipment, but as they left, one handed Colin a business card. I caught the logo before he slipped it into his pocket. Vale Coastal Redevelopment, Grant's company that afternoon. Elise called and said I was overreacting. Grant had arranged the appraisal as a favor. Banks required updated values. Insurance companies requested them all the time. She said he was trying to protect me from paperwork I no longer needed to manage alone. There was no cruelty in her voice, which made it worse. At 7 the next morning, I found a certified envelope beneath my office door. The return address belonged to Chesapeake Mutual, the company that had insured Whitaker Landing for 23 years. I opened it beside Samuel's old desk. The first sentence informed me that our pollution liability coverage was being canceled immediately because we had failed to report a recent diesel release incident. I read the sentence twice, then checked the policy number. It was ours. The letter referenced a spill at Whitaker Landing 3 days earlier. But 3 days earlier, I had been at the marina from sunrise until midnight. There had been no spill. I carried the cancellation letter to the fuel dock and read it again under the security light above the pump house. Policy terminated. Failure to report environmental contamination. Material misrepresentation. The words were written in the dry language insurance companies use when they want to sound neutral while cutting a business open. I unlocked the pump cabinet and checked the gauges. The primary diesel tank was within its normal operating range. The emergency shutoff seal was intact. The transfer hoses were dry. I ran 2 fingers beneath the coupling joints. No residue, no fresh staining, no odor beyond the ordinary mixture of salt, metal, and fuel that had lived on that dock for decades. If diesel had escaped 3 days earlier, the harbor would have remembered. Water keeps records. It carries sheen into pilings, stains the foam line, softens sealants, and leaves traces in cracks sunlight cannot reach. I found none. At 8 sharp, I called Chesapeake Mutual and asked for Martin Hale, the senior underwriter who had handled our account for nearly 12 years. His assistant kept me waiting. 17 minutes, Martin finally came on, sounding uncomfortable. Nora, I was hoping we could speak after the internal review. What internal review? The one connected to the incident report. There was no incident. I understand that is your position, my position. Those 2 words meant someone had already placed a competing version of reality into the official file. I asked who reported the spill. Martin said he could not release the name during an investigation, but the report had come from an authorized representative of Whitaker Landing. It included photographs, a description of the release, a cleanup estimate, and a statement that management delayed notification for more than 48 hours. Which member of management signed it? I cannot discuss that by phone. You have insured this marina for 23 years. Why did no one call me before canceling a policy that protects 32 employees and more than 100 vessels? His breath left the receiver slowly. Because the report included concerns about your capacity to manage the response. For several seconds, I heard only halyard lines tapping against aluminum masts outside my window. What concerns? Memory lapses, conflicting instructions, an allegation that you ordered staff not to document the release because you feared the bank would react. I thanked him and ended the call before anger made me careless. Someone had not merely invented a spill, they had built a story around me. By 9, Elise and Grant were sitting across from my desk. I had called Elise first. She arrived with Grant before I asked him to come. That had become their pattern. Any conversation meant for my niece somehow required her husband's interpretation. Elise wore a cream sweater and rubbed the edge of one sleeve between her fingers. She had done the same thing as a child whenever she feared disappointing me. Grant sat beside her in a navy jacket, one ankle resting neatly over the opposite knee. I placed the cancellation letter on the desk. Elise, did you submit an incident report? Her head lifted sharply. No, Grant reached for the letter, but I kept my hand on it. Did you? He did not appear offended. Accusations seemed to make him gentler. Nora, I contacted Martin after Colin mentioned a possible sheen near the service slips. I was trying to prevent a minor issue from becoming a regulatory disaster. There was no sheen. Colin believed there was. Colin is not authorized to report claims. Grant leaned forward. That is precisely the problem. No one was sure who had authority in an emergency. You were unavailable. Elise was worried, and the weather was shifting. I made a judgment call. I was at this marina all day. Elise looked at Grant. He answered for her. You were here physically. The sentence settled between us. I looked at my niece. What does that mean? Aunt Nora, please do not turn this into an attack. You have been carrying too much since Uncle Samuel died. You sleep here. Some nights you skip meals. Last month you called me twice to ask when the insurance inspection was scheduled. The first call was about the fuel tank inspection. The second was about stormwater. Her expression faltered. Grant placed a reassuring hand over hers. That distinction may be clear to you now, he said, but it was not clear to the people listening at the time. I studied him. Samuel had trusted slowly. He used to say charm was credit extended without collateral. I had laughed, but he rarely misjudged anyone. Grant had worked hard to earn our confidence. When Elise's interior design studio failed, he negotiated with creditors and covered payroll for her last 2 employees. He drove Samuel to radiation appointments when I was trapped in Baltimore. At the funeral, he handled the caterer, the church, and calls I could not bear to answer. He had not entered our lives as a villain. He had entered carrying groceries, paperwork, and exactly the right words. That history was why part of me still wanted his explanation to make sense. Grant read the cancellation notice. This can be fixed, he said. Chesapeake Mutual is overreacting because the marina's reporting structure is outdated. Let me speak to them. We will acknowledge a communication failure, install monitoring systems, and create a formal emergency management role. For someone qualified, you are a property consultant. I manage risk for waterfront assets. You sell them. His jaw tightened for only a moment. Elise leaned toward me. No one is trying to sell the marina. Grant is trying to keep the bank from panicking. That is why he ordered the valuation. There it was, not scheduled, ordered. I looked at Grant. Which bank asked for an updated valuation? Severn Commercial. Our lender. The reply was reasonable, almost comforting. Then I noticed the date at the top of the cancellation letter. It had been issued at 4:12 the previous afternoon. The envelope had not reached my office until that morning. I had not called Elise until 7:30, yet Grant had ordered the property appraisal the day before the insurance company issued its decision. He had begun preparing for the consequences before I even knew there was a problem. Grant did not answer immediately. That hesitation lasted less than 2 seconds, but I had spent nearly 4 decades interviewing people who believed silence could hide the order in which they had learned things. It never did. The appraisal had already been discussed, he said at last. The insurance letter only made it more urgent. Discussed with whom? Elise, Colin, the bank's relationship manager, not with the owner. His expression remained composed. You have always said Whitaker Landing belongs to the family. It belongs to the corporation. Samuel and I formed. I hold 72% of it. Elise winced as though I had reduced our relationship to a ledger. Aunt Nora, no one is questioning your ownership. Then why is your husband ordering appraisals of my property? Grant folded the cancellation letter and aligned it carefully with the edge of my desk. Because someone has to plan beyond the next emergency. He said it softly, almost kindly. That was Grant's gift. He could turn an insult into an act of concern before the listener had time to defend against it. I looked at Elise. Did you authorize him to represent the marina? She glanced toward Grant, then back to me. I told him he could help with the bank and the insurance company. What exactly did you sign? Her fingers found the edge of her sleeve again. Nothing that changes ownership. That was not my question. Grant stood. We are all emotional. Let us pause before this becomes damaging. He placed one hand on the back of Elise's chair, not touching her, but directing her all the same. I will call Chesapeake Mutual. Colin will document the dock systems. We will prepare a response package, and when you have rested, we can review it together. I almost laughed. He was dismissing me from a meeting in my own office. Instead, I leaned back and let him believe the conversation was over. "You do that," I said. Relief softened Elise's face. She rose and came around the desk to kiss my cheek. "We love you," she whispered. Grant did not say the words, he only smiled. After they left, I locked the office door and opened the corporate authorization binder Samuel had kept in the bottom drawer. The binder was old-fashioned by design. Digital systems were convenient, but paper revealed pressure marks, replaced pages, missing initials, and signatures copied by people who never learned how the original writer held a pen. The marina's authority structure was simple. I was managing owner. Colin could approve ordinary maintenance expenses, up to $25,000. Elise could act for me only through a specific written power of attorney, witnessed and notarized. Grant's name appeared nowhere. I searched the binder twice. Then I opened our electronic records. My administrative password failed. I entered it again. Access denied. I tried the backup credentials stored in the sealed envelope inside my desk safe. Access denied. The third attempt triggered a message instructing me to contact the system administrator. Whitaker Landing did not have a system administrator. We had a local technology contractor who came twice a month and complained about our ancient wiring. I called him. "Mrs. Whitaker," Jeremy said, "I was told you approved the security migration." "Who told you, Mr. Vale? What did he ask you to change?" There was a pause filled with keyboard clicks. He said the insurance review required centralized access. We moved accounting, vendor contracts, environmental files, and pump monitoring reports into a new cloud system. "Who has administrator privileges?" "Mr. Vale, Mrs. Vale, Mr. Mercer, and you. My credentials do not work." Another pause. "That is strange. Your profile shows active. Reset it." "I cannot." "Why not?" Mr. Vale requested that all account changes require dual authorization during the transition. My grip tightened around the receiver. "Grant Vale does not work for this marina." Jeremy stopped typing. "I thought he was the new managing consultant." "Who gave you that title?" He sent a signed authorization. "Signed by whom?" "Elise Vale." I ended the call and walked into the outer office. My assistant's desk was empty. Her family photographs had been removed. In their place sat a young man wearing a headset and typing into a laptop I had never seen. "Where is Dana?" He pulled one side of the headset away. "She was reassigned to the temporary administration trailer." "By whom?" "Mr. Mercer." I walked through the repair yard toward the trailer. Along the way, I noticed new keypads mounted beside the parts room, records office, and environmental storage locker. Workers lowered their voices when they saw me. Two mechanics pretended to study an engine invoice until I passed. Dana was packing archived invoices into plastic crates. She had worked beside me for 16 years. She knew every supplier, every lease renewal, and every fisherman who paid late in winter but caught up by spring. "What happened?" I asked. Her eyes shifted toward the open trailer door. "Colin said Grant is reorganizing operations." "Grant has no authority," that is what I said, and he told me the family approved it. I closed the door behind me. "Has anyone asked you to alter records?" "Not exactly." That meant yes. Dana pulled a folder from beneath a stack of marina maps. Inside were revised access lists. My name remained at the top, but nearly every important function beside it was marked review required. Fuel purchases, environmental reports, bank correspondence, insurance claims, capital expenses. Grant's name appeared beside each one with the words "final approval." At the bottom was Elise's electronic signature. I photographed every page with my phone. "Do not confront anyone," I told Dana, "and do not remove these records." She searched my face. "Are you in trouble?" "Someone hopes I am." I returned to the main dock shortly before noon. Colin was speaking with a contractor beside the fuel pump cabinet. The moment he saw me, he stepped between the man and the open panel. "What are you installing?" I asked. "Updated monitoring equipment." "Approved by whom?" He exhaled through his nose. "Nora, we cannot keep doing this every time we improve something." Grant is trying to save the marina from what?" He looked toward the water. That was when I saw the device behind his shoulder. A black rectangular module had been mounted inside the fuel control cabinet. It was connected to the transfer pump, the emergency shutoff, and the electronic flow meter. A small antenna extended from its upper edge. It was not a monitoring unit, it was a remote control module. and someone who was not standing on my dock could now open and close my fuel valves. I stepped closer to the open cabinet. The contractor shifted his weight, looking from Colin to me as if he had just realized the two people supervising his work did not agree on who was in charge. "What company are you with?" I asked. "Harbor Systems Integration. And what were you told this device would control?" He glanced at Colin again. "Remote emergency shutdown, flow monitoring, automated leak response." "Can it open the transfer valves?" The contractor hesitated. Colin answered for him. "Only authorized users can access it." That was not my question. The contractor cleared his throat. "Technically, yes. The module can start or stop a transfer cycle remotely. It can also open a valve for testing. Remove it." Colin stepped forward. "You cannot keep rejecting every modernization because Samuel did not install it himself." The mention of my husband was deliberate. People had begun using Samuel's death as evidence that my judgment belonged to the past. I looked at the contractor. "Do you have a signed work order from Whitaker Landing?" He opened a tablet and turned the screen toward me. At the bottom of the document was Elise's electronic signature. Beneath it, Grant was listed as project supervisor. I took photographs of each page, then I said, "Do not activate the module until I review the installation." The contractor nodded, relieved to receive an instruction that did not require choosing sides. Colin's face hardened. "You are putting the marina at risk." "No," I said. "I am asking who can move fuel without standing beside the pump." I closed the cabinet and secured it with the mechanical log pad Samuel had installed 20 years earlier. Colin watched me pocket the key. For the rest of the afternoon, nothing happened. That was almost enough to make me doubt myself. The marina moved through its ordinary rhythm. A charter boat returned with 6 exhausted tourists and no fish. Ben Ortiz crawled beneath a 30-foot cruiser to replace a corroded exhaust clamp. Dana argued with a supplier over a duplicated invoice. By sunset, the harbor looked calm enough to make suspicion feel foolish. Grant called shortly after 8. "Elise told me what happened at the fuel dock. Then she knows someone installed remote access without my permission. It is standard safety equipment. Why does safety equipment need the ability to open a fuel valve from a telephone? To test the system and respond to emergencies. Who has access? We are still configuring permissions." "That means you do." His silence answered before we did. "Nora, this hostility is becoming destructive. You are treating every attempt to protect the marina as a personal attack. Because every attempt seems to remove me from another part of it. You are tired, go home." I looked through my office window at the black water beyond the slips. "I am home." I disconnected the call. That night I slept on the old sofa in Samuel's office. At 4:47 the next morning, the harbor alarm began to sound. It was not the electronic alert from the new system. It was the old brass bell mounted outside the repair shed, the one workers rang when phones failed or weather drowned out their voices. I was awake before the second strike. I ran outside in yesterday's clothes and found Ben sprinting along the dock. "Fuel sheen near Sea Pier," he shouted. The air smelled sharp and oily. By the time I reached the service slips, a rainbow film stretched across the water between 2 rows of boats. Under the floodlights, the colors shifted from blue to violet to a dirty copper red. Colin came from the pump house carrying absorbent pads. "What happened?" I asked. He pointed toward the fuel dock. "Transfer valve must have been left partially open." "By whom?" He looked directly at me. "You inspected it yesterday. The accusation arrived too quickly. A real emergency makes people ask questions. A prepared emergency gives them answers." I ordered Ben to deploy floating containment boom across the mouth of the service basin. Colin told him to wait for Grant's instructions. Ben froze between us. "Do it now," I said. He obeyed me. For the next 20 minutes, we worked without speaking. Absorbent pads darkened as they drew fuel from the surface. I shut down every pump manually and checked the mechanical seals. None showed signs of failure. Grant arrived in a raincoat over pressed trousers. Elise followed in her car. Her hair pulled back, her face pale with worry. Grant did not examine the pump. He photographed the water. Then he photographed me. "Why are you doing that?" I asked. "We need a complete record. You arrived 5 minutes ago. I am documenting the response." Colin brought him a clipboard. I recognized the form immediately. Environmental Incident Report. The first section already contained a time, estimated volume, weather conditions, and probable cause. Probable cause, operator error during manual inspection. Operator, Eleanor Whitaker. I looked at Colin. When was this form prepared? Just now. The ink in the weather section was dry. I took the clipboard from him and walked to the edge of the dock. At first glance, the sheen appeared to spread from the fuel station toward the service slips. That was the story they wanted the water to tell. But the tide was going out. A release from our fuel dock should have drifted southeast toward the channel. Instead, the densest part of the slick had collected northwest, against the inner pilings of Sea Pier. The wind was light from the east. It could not explain the direction. I crouched near the nearest piling. A thick line of oily residue clung to the wood 6 inches above the current water level. That meant the fuel had reached the piling earlier, near high tide, then remained as the water dropped. The alarm had sounded at 4:47. High tide had occurred shortly after 2. Whatever entered the basin had likely been released hours before Colin claimed to discover it. I followed the residue along the pilings. It grew darker toward the far end of Sea Pier, away from the fuel dock. Grant watched me. What are you doing? Listening to the water. He gave Elise a concerned look. I continued toward the final slip, where an empty berth sat beside the maintenance shed. A faint chemical smell rose from the surface there, sweeter and harsher than ordinary marine diesel. I dipped one absorbent pad into the thickest portion of the sheen and sealed it inside a clean freezer bag from the spill kit. Colin stepped toward me. You cannot collect official samples like that, I know. Then why take it? Because official evidence and useful information are not always the same thing. His expression changed, only slightly, but enough. Grant began issuing instructions about notifying environmental authorities. Elise stood near the fuel dock, hugging herself against the cold. She looked frightened, but not surprised. I returned to the office and opened the maintenance cabinet. The daily inspection ledger lay on top of the other records. Yesterday's page contained an entry stating that I had tested the transfer valve at 6:20 in the evening and observed minor sticking during closure. Beside the entry were my initials. They looked convincing. Same letters, same general shape, but the downward stroke on the N leaned right. Mine had leaned left since I broke my wrist at 53. Someone had forged my initials before the spill occurred. I photographed the forged initials before touching the ledger. Then I carried it outside. By then, 2 trucks from the Maryland Department of the Environment had arrived. Their crews moved quickly, laying additional containment boom and collecting official water samples. A harbor patrol officer stood near the pump house taking names. Grant had positioned himself beside the officials. He spoke with the controlled urgency of a man who wanted to appear helpful without appearing responsible. Colin stood at his shoulder, supplying times and equipment details. Elise remained several feet away, her arms folded tightly across her chest. I held the ledger open. This entry was forged. The harbor officer turned toward me. Grant lowered his voice. Nora, perhaps we should discuss that privately. No, someone entered a false inspection under my name before the spill. Colin looked offended. That is your handwriting. They are my initials. They are not my handwriting. Grant stepped closer, careful to keep his expression patient. You inspected the fuel system yesterday. Colin saw you at the cabinet. The contractor saw you there. You locked the panel yourself. I inspected an unauthorized control module, and afterward, you refused to let the technician complete the installation. Because it could operate the valves remotely, the environmental investigator, a woman named Rachel Dunn, looked toward the cabinet. Was the system active? Colin answered immediately. No, it had not been commissioned. Can you prove that? I asked. His eyes flickered. The contractor can. Grant gently took the ledger from my hands. He examined the page, as if he were approaching a frightened animal. Nora, you have used several variations of your initials over the years. Anyone who has worked here knows that. I have not written an N like that in 16 years. He glanced toward Rachel. My aunt suffered a serious wrist fracture years ago. She sometimes becomes focused on small details when she is under stress. The sentence was designed to sound compassionate. It also made me sound unstable. I turned to Elise. Tell them I called you about the appraisal. because Grant ordered it before the insurance cancellation. She stared at me. Grant's voice remained soft. That has nothing to do with the spill. It establishes that you were preparing for a crisis before it happened. Nora, you arranged an appraisal, you changed the marina's administrative access, you installed a remote control device on the fuel system. Now a spill appears, along with a forged record blaming me. Several workers had stopped pretending not to listen. Grant noticed them. He closed the ledger. Do you hear yourself? His tone was no longer gentle. It was quieter than anger, which made it more effective. You are accusing your niece, your operations manager, a contractor, an insurance company, and me of coordinating an environmental crime against you. I am accusing someone of falsifying a record based on the angle of one pen stroke, based on 38 years of recognizing manufactured losses. And that is exactly the problem, he said. Elise moved between us. Aunt Nora, please stop. Her voice trembled. I looked at her face and saw fear not of Grant, but of me. At least that was what I believed then. She took my hand. You have been waiting for something terrible to happen ever since Uncle Samuel died. Every missed call becomes a betrayal. Every change becomes a threat. Grant orders an appraisal, and you think he is stealing the property. Colin updates a system, and you think he is sabotaging it. Now there is an accident, and you think everyone planned it. This was not an accident. You do not know that. I know I did not write those initials. She released my hand. Last month you accused Dana of moving Samuel's toolbox. Because it was moved, you moved it. I remembered the incident. Dana had found the toolbox in the storage room after I insisted it belonged beneath Samuel's workbench. I had carried it there myself weeks earlier, while clearing space for an engine rebuild, then forgotten. It had been a small mistake. Grant had preserved it. He had collected it and waited for the right moment to spend it. Elise continued, You called me at midnight because you thought someone was inside the repair shed. There was a light on. It was Ben working late. I did not know that. That is what we are trying to tell you. Her eyes filled with tears. The workers nearby lowered their heads. Grant placed one hand lightly on her shoulder. Nora, no one is saying you are incapable of making every decision. We are saying grief and exhaustion are affecting you. Rachel Dunn interrupted. We need to establish immediate operational control. Until the source is confirmed, someone must be responsible for environmental compliance. I am responsible, I said. Grant looked at the forged ledger. That may expose the marina to greater liability. The harbor officer shifted uncomfortably. Colin spoke next. I warned Nora yesterday that the valve was sticking. That is a lie. You told me you would handle it yourself. I never said that. He looked toward the mechanics. Ben was there. Ben stood near the containment boom. Every face turned toward him. He was 19, underpaid, and dependent on Colin's recommendation for an apprenticeship. I saw the conflict move across his face before he lowered his eyes. I heard them arguing about the system, he said. What did I say? I asked. He hesitated. I do not remember exactly. Grant nodded as though Ben had confirmed everything. That is enough for now. It was not enough. But in public disputes, uncertainty often favors the person who prepared first. Rachel ordered the fuel dock closed pending inspection. She requested copies of maintenance logs, employee statements, pump records, and insurance correspondence. Grant told her he would provide everything, not me, him. As the cleanup crews continued working, I returned to my office. The door was already open. Grant entered behind me and closed it. You need to stop, he said. His kindness was gone. You are frightening, Elise. You are damaging the business. And you are making it easier for the authorities to conclude that you concealed the spill. You created this. I am trying to contain what you created. For the first time, I saw something cold beneath his careful manners. Then the door opened. Elise stepped aside, holding a blue folder. She had been crying, but her voice was steady. Aunt Nora, Grant and I spoke to an attorney last week. I looked at the folder. What kind of attorney? One who handles emergency protective arrangements. She placed it on Samuel's desk. If you keep refusing help, we may have to ask the court to temporarily remove your operational authority. I looked at the blue folder without opening it. Elise stood on the other side of Samuel's desk, waiting for me to explode. Grant was waiting too. That was what they needed, a raised voice, a slammed door, One frightened employee willing to say I had become erratic. They were not simply taking control of the marina. They were building a record that would make resistance look like proof of incapacity. So I gave them the opposite. I sat down slowly and let my shoulders sag. "You may be right," I said. Elise blinked. Grant did not. His expression barely changed, but I saw a small release of tension around his mouth. I opened the folder. Inside was a draft petition requesting temporary authority over Whitaker Landing's finances, environmental compliance, and daily operations. It did not call me incompetent. The language was more careful than that. It described me as a grieving senior owner experiencing intermittent confusion during a period of extraordinary stress. The petition requested only temporary protection. Temporary was another useful word. People accepted permanent losses more easily when they were introduced as short-term precautions. I turned the pages slowly. Who would receive authority? "Elise," Grant said, "professional support from you if needed." I looked at my niece. She seemed almost hopeful. "I do not want to fight you," she said. "I want you to rest before something happens that cannot be repaired." Something already had, but I lowered my eyes. "I am tired," I said, "more than I have admitted." The lie hurt because part of it was true. Since Samuel died, I had slept badly. I had eaten dinner over paperwork. I had listened for his footsteps in rooms I knew were empty. Grief had not made me incapable, but it had exhausted me in ways Grant could exploit. I let my hands tremble slightly as I returned the petition to the folder. Perhaps I have been holding on too tightly. Elise crossed the room and knelt beside my chair. Relief softened her face. "You do not have to prove anything to us." I nearly asked whether she had practiced that sentence. Instead, I touched her hair the way I had when she was a child. "I am sorry I frightened you." Her eyes closed. Grant stepped closer. "This does not need to become a court matter," he said. "If you voluntarily reduce your responsibilities, we can protect the marina and preserve your dignity." Preserve my dignity, as though it already belonged to him. What would you suggest? He was ready. "For the next 30 days, Colin manages daily operations. I handle insurance, lender communication, and regulatory response. Elise oversees family ownership matters. You retain your title and attend any meeting you wish, but you do not issue direct instructions involving fuel systems, banking, personnel, or environmental compliance. Every important function, every lever that mattered." I nodded, as though the proposal required more strength than I possessed. "I want it in writing, of course, and no sale." Grant smiled gently. "No one is selling anything." That was his second lie that morning. I signed nothing, but I agreed to step back while the documents were prepared. By lunchtime, everyone at Whitaker Landing seemed to know. Workers spoke softly. When I passed, Dana offered to drive me home. Colin addressed me with an exaggerated patience that made each sentence sound intended for a nursing home corridor. I played my role. I forgot where I had placed my glasses while they were hanging from my collar. I asked Colin whether the environmental officers were arriving after they had already left. I allowed Grant to repeat instructions I understood the first time. The performance made me feel dirty. It also made them careless. At 3, I watched Colin remove the inspection tags from 2 components inside the fuel cabinet. He slipped them into his pocket before carrying the parts toward the repair shed. Normally, replaced components were labeled, entered into the maintenance ledger, and stored for 90 days. Marine insurers required that chain of documentation because failed equipment often became evidence. I shuffled toward him. "Are those the damaged valves?" He turned quickly. "Old sensor housings, shouldn't Dana log them?" "I already handled it." I smiled apologetically. "Of course, I forgot." He relaxed that evening. After most of the staff had left, I returned to the repair yard carrying a paper cup of tea. I moved slowly whenever I passed a window. Colin had placed the removed components in a red scrap bin behind the welding station. The inspection tags were gone. I searched the bin anyway. Nothing. Then I noticed the side door to the maintenance shed had not closed completely. A strip of yellow light lay across the gravel. Inside, Colin stood at the workbench with his back to me. He was peeling labels from several small metal parts and feeding them into an industrial shredder. I remained behind the doorframe. When he finished, he swept the shredded paper into a trash bag and left through the opposite entrance. I waited until his truck pulled out of the parking lot. The shredder had reduced the tags into narrow strips, but one adhesive label had stuck beneath the machine's lower tray. I put on gloves from the spill cabinet and removed it with tweezers. Most of the printing had been torn away. What remained showed half a manufacturer's logo and a serial number, HSM 44981. I photographed it, sealed it inside an unused sample envelope, and returned to my office. Our old maintenance database was no longer accessible through my account, but Samuel had insisted on keeping annual printed inventories. I found the current binder in a locked steel cabinet behind his desk. The serial number did not belong to Whitaker Landing. I checked it twice. Then I searched the vessel service records. 3 months earlier, our technicians had installed a harbor-safe remote fuel control package aboard a 46-foot private launch named Second Chance. The owner listed on the work order was Grant Vail. The serial number on the missing marina component matched the controller installed on his boat. Colin had not replaced damaged equipment. He had been removing evidence that, apart from Grant's private launch, had somehow entered my fuel system. I turned to the window. Across the dark harbor, a single navigation light moved slowly away from the marina. Grant's launch was leaving its slip, and according to our dock schedule, no one was supposed to be aboard it. I watched Grant's navigation light until it disappeared beyond the breakwater. Then I called Mara Singh. She answered on the 4th ring with the irritated voice of someone who had been asleep and considered sleep a professional obligation. "Nora, either the harbor is on fire or you have forgotten that civilized people wait until morning. I have a contaminated water sample, a forged maintenance entry, and a fuel control component linked to a private vessel." There was silence. What kind of sample? Absorbent material sealed in a freezer bag. Another silence, less impressed than the first. You collected it yourself. Yes, wearing gloves? Yes, did anyone witness the collection? No. Did you photograph the location before taking it? Not before. Nor I know. You know because you spent 38 years telling claimants not to do exactly what you just did. I needed information, not evidence. That distinction may save me from strangling you. Mara arrived at the marina shortly after 6 the next morning. She was 63, compact, silver-haired, and incapable of entering a room without making every careless person inside it feel inspected. We had met 26 years earlier while investigating a yacht fire near Norfolk. The owner claimed an electrical fault. Mara found candle wax inside a supposedly sealed engine compartment. The yacht had been insured for twice its market value 3 weeks before it burned. We had trusted each other ever since. She stepped into Samuel's office carrying 2 aluminum cases and a canvas field bag. "You look terrible," she said. "You always know what to say. I save kindness for people who preserve samples correctly." I locked the door. First, I showed her the cancellation letter, then the forged maintenance entry, the photographs of the remote controller, the damaged label, and the service record linking its serial number to Grant's launch. Mara read everything without interrupting. When she finished, she placed both hands on Samuel's desk. "You have enough to be suspicious," she said. "You do not have enough to accuse anyone. I know, you know emotionally. I need you to know professionally." She pointed to the freezer bag. "This may tell us what was in the water. It will not prove where it came from, when it entered the harbor, who released it, or whether you contaminated it after collection." I did not contaminate it. That is what every honest person says before an opposing attorney asks them to prove it. She opened one aluminum case and removed a glass jar, sterile forceps, evidence tape, and a portable inspection lamp. After photographing the bag from several angles, she cut it open and transferred a small section of the stained absorbent material into the jar. The odor became stronger immediately. Mara brought the jar near her face without touching it. "That is not ordinary dock diesel. I thought it smelled sweet. It does." She shone the inspection lamp across the stained fibers. "Possibly a glycol ether or industrial flushing solvent. Something designed to dissolve residue. Would a marina use it?" "Not this marina. I inventoried your environmental storage room during the insurance renewal last year." "Grant's launch? Maybe. Many private repair crews use specialized solvent when cleaning portable tanks or fuel transfer lines." She sealed the jar. "Do not turn a possibility into a conclusion. By 8, we were driving to a small materials laboratory outside Baltimore. Mara had worked with the owner for years and trusted him to provide a confidential preliminary analysis. We did not use names. The technician labeled the jar as an unidentified marine contamination sample and asked us to return that afternoon. On the drive back, Mara studied the service invoice for Grant's launch. Who installed the controller package? Ben and Colin. Who signed off? Colin. And where's the vessel now? It left last night. Do you know who was aboard? No, then start with facts you can establish. Dock camera footage, fuel purchases, departure time, weather, harbor traffic records. My camera access has been restricted. Restricted is not destroyed. Grant controls the administrator account. Mara looked out at the highway. Then do not fight for access yet. Let him believe the system belongs to him. That was easy for her to say. Every hour I stayed silent gave Grant more control. But silence had already produced more than confrontation. Back at the marina, I found Ben beneath a center console boat, tightening a mounting bracket. His hands were black with grease. Did you work on Grant's launch when the remote fuel controller was installed? His wrench stopped. A few months ago, did the package include replacement modules? 2 control heads, 1 primary, 1 spare. Where was the spare stored? He slid out from beneath the boat. I gave it to Colin. Did you record the serial numbers? For my class portfolio. Ben attended community college at night and documented repair projects for an apprenticeship application. Do you still have the video? His eyes shifted toward the repair shed. I think so. Do not look for it here. He studied my face. Is this about the spill? It may be, Colin said. The valve stuck because you interrupted the installation. What do you believe? He wiped his hands on a rag. I believe the sheen was already near Sea Pier when I came down from the parking lot. What time? A little after 4:30. You rang the bell at 4:47. I tried calling Colin first. How long did it take him to answer? He did not. Grant called me back. The morning seemed to narrow around us. You called Colin, but Grant returned the call. Ben nodded. He said Colin was already on his way. He told me not to touch anything until they arrived. But you rang the alarm. The sheen was spreading. Did you tell anyone this? Colin said I was confused about the timing. A truck door slammed near the repair shed. Ben stepped away from me. Colin was walking toward us. I gave Ben the rag back, finished the bracket, then I moved on before Colin could ask what we had discussed. At 4 that afternoon, Mara called me from the laboratory. The sample contains marine diesel mixed with a high concentration of 2-butoxyethanol and a corrosion inhibitor, she said. That combination is consistent with a commercial fuel system flushing solution. Do we stock it? No. Would it occur naturally in harbor water? Absolutely not. My first real confirmation, someone had introduced treated fuel or cleaning waste into the basin. Can we use the result? Not in court, not with your collection method. The defense would destroy it before lunch. The satisfaction drained away. So we have nothing. We have direction. Mara's voice sharpened. And something else. The ratio is wrong for an accidental cleaning discharge. Whoever mixed this used enough solvent to create a distinctive laboratory signature, but not enough to interfere with ignition or damage the pump system. What does that mean? It means they wanted the contamination identified. I looked through the office window toward the fuel dock. They wanted the insurer to find it. Yes, Mara paused. Nora, this spill was not the main event. It was a rehearsal designed to establish a history of environmental failure. Before I could answer, a new email appeared on my screen. The subject line read, Second pollution exent. Preliminary nota of claim. The reported date was tomorrow. For several seconds, I stared at the email without touching the keyboard. The reported date was tomorrow, not the date the notice had been written, not the date the insurer expected an inspection. The document claimed that a second pollution incident had already occurred on September 29th. It was still September 28th. I took a photograph of the screen with my phone, then printed the message and disconnected the office computer from the Marina network. Mara, I said, someone has filed a claim for an accident that has not happened yet. Forward it to me. I am not forwarding anything through this system. Good. Photograph the header information. I opened the message properties and recorded the sender, routing data, and creation time. The notice appeared to have come from an environmental response contractor called Bay Shield Recovery. I knew the company. They handled emergency containment and contaminated soil removal across Maryland and Virginia. The body of the email contained an estimated cleanup cost of $286,000. It described a ruptured transfer line, diesel reaching the outer harbor, and immediate deployment of 3 response vessels. Every detail was written in the past tense. What time was it created? Mara asked. 2:14 this morning, before Grant's launch left the marina, or after? About 40 minutes before. She was silent. You need to leave that office, she said. Now, I printed 2 more copies, placed one inside Samuel's old fireproof cabinet, and slipped the second beneath the lining of my handbag. Then I walked out of the administration building, with the careful, uncertain steps Grant expected from me. Colin was standing beside the fuel dock with a tablet in his hands. The pumps remained closed, but 2 contractors were inspecting the transfer lines. He looked up. Everything all right? I think I opened the wrong email, I said. His eyes sharpened. What email? I am not sure. Something about tomorrow. He lowered the tablet. Can you show me? I touched my forehead as though embarrassed. I deleted it. The answer bothered him. Good. I continued toward the parking lot without looking back. Mara met me at a coffee shop 5 miles from the marina. We sat in the farthest booth from the entrance while she examined the printed notice through reading glasses. The cleanup estimate is unusually specific, she said. Because someone already negotiated it, or because someone copied it from a proposal. She pointed to the contractor's reference number. This format includes a client account code. We may be able to identify when Bay Shield opened the file. Can they tell us? Not without a legal reason, but the insurer can ask. My phone rang before she finished. The caller was Martin Hale from Chesapeake Mutual. His voice sounded worse than it had the previous morning. Nora, we have received notice of an additional pollution event at Whitaker Landing. It has not happened. I understand that is what you are saying. The event date is tomorrow. A long pause followed. Where did you obtain the notice? It came to my marina email. That communication was not intended for you. The words escaped him before he could stop them. Who was it intended for? I cannot discuss active claim communications. Martin, someone has reported a future accident. I agree the date requires review. Requires review? Mara held out her hand. I placed the call on speaker, Martin continued. Given the first incident, the reporting dispute, and the possibility of a second contamination event, Chesapeake Mutual is suspending all pollution and operational liability coverage effective at noon today. You cannot cancel coverage because someone predicts a spill. We are not making a determination of fault. We are limiting exposure while the facts are investigated. More than 100 vessels are berthed there. I know, 32 employees work there. I know then you know suspending coverage may shut down the entire marina. His voice dropped. Nora, you need independent counsel. The line went dead. Mara stared at the phone. That was not insurance advice. No, that was a warning. At 11:45, Severn Commercial Bank sent its own notice. The marina's loan agreement required continuous liability and environmental coverage. Loss of either policy triggered a 7-day cure period. If replacement coverage was not secured before the deadline, the bank could freeze our operating credit, accelerate the remaining loan balance, and petition for emergency sale of the secured property. 7 days. Whitaker Landing had 7 days before a paperwork problem became a foreclosure. I drove back to Annapolis beneath a sky turning the color of wet steel. The weather radio announced that a tropical system moving north from the Carolinas had strengthened unexpectedly. It was not projected to become a hurricane, but forecasters expected severe coastal winds, heavy rain, and dangerous tidal flooding across the Chesapeake within the week. The storm was expected to reach us on the final day of the bank's cure period. The timing was too perfect. At the marina, workers were already securing loose equipment and checking mooring lines. Grant stood outside my office speaking with 2 men in dark overcoats. One carried a bank portfolio, the other held architectural plans. Grant dismissed them when he saw me. You should not be here, he said. The pressure is not good for you. What did the bank tell you? His expression became solemn. That our situation is serious. Our situation? Elise and I are trying to protect what remains. By meeting architects, contingency planners, I looked through the glass door. Rolled plans covered Samuel's desk. One sheet had been left partly open. I could see the outline of our shoreline, divided into 3 rectangular structures surrounding a central courtyard. Not a marina, a hotel. Grant followed my gaze. The bank will not wait forever, he said. Without coverage, the loan goes into default. Without the loan, payroll stops, boats leave, employees lose their jobs. You arrange the conditions causing the default. His eyes hardened, but his voice stayed calm. This is exactly the kind of accusation that concerns Elise. What do you want? To prevent total collapse, he opened a leather folder and removed a single-page letter of intent. A redevelopment group is prepared to purchase Whitaker Landing, assume the debt, retain essential staff, and allow you to remain in the cottage for the rest of your life. Which redevelopment group? The identity is confidential until you agree to negotiations. What is the offer? His answer was less than half the marina's conservative market value. I almost smiled. The property appraisal you ordered was not for the bank. It established what a distressed buyer might pay. A distressed buyer you found before the distress existed. Grant returned the letter to his folder. You have 7 days, Nora. The storm may give you fewer. He walked past me toward the parking lot. Before climbing into his car, he turned around. By this time next week, you will either sell the marina willingly, or Severn Commercial will sell it for you. Grant expected resistance. That was why I decided to surrender. The next morning, I called an emergency staff meeting in the repair shed. Every employee who was not handling storm preparation stood between tool cabinets, engine stands, and stacked rolls of containment boom. Rain tapped lightly against the metal roof. The storm was still several days away, but the harbor had already taken on the tense, gray stillness that comes before bad weather. Grant stood near the front with Elise and Colin. He had come prepared to remove me. A blue folder rested beneath his arm. I recognized the temporary operating agreement Elise had shown me. Beside him, Colin held revised duty assignments. Grant's attorney waited near the back wall with a leather briefcase. They had rehearsed the morning. I had rehearsed it too. I walked slowly to the center of the shed and placed both hands on the back of a folding chair. I owe all of you an apology, I said. The room became completely silent. Several workers looked at one another. Dana stared at me from beside the parts counter. Ben stood near the open bay door, his face unreadable. I allowed my eyes to move across the room without settling on anyone for long. The last few weeks have been difficult. I believed I could carry the marina through the insurance dispute and the environmental investigation the same way I have carried it through every storm for 40 years. I paused and looked toward Samuel's old workbench. But believing something does not make it true. Elise pressed her lips together. Grant lowered his gaze as though respecting my dignity, but I could see satisfaction in the angle of his shoulders. I have been tired, I continued. I have confused details. I have reacted emotionally. That has made an already dangerous situation harder for the people trying to protect this place. The words tasted like rust. I had spent my entire career defending truth from people who shaped facts for convenience. Now I was shaping the truth myself. But a trap is only useful if the animal believes the ground is safe. I have agreed to step away from daily operations for 30 days. A murmur moved through the workers. Donna took one step toward me. Nora, I raised my hand. This is temporary. Grant's attorney opened the blue folder. Under the agreement, Colin would continue supervising staff and maintenance. Elise would oversee family ownership matters. Grant would become temporary director of safety, insurance, lender communication, and environmental compliance. The fuel dock, reporting systems, storm response procedures, pump controls, and hazardous material records would all fall under his authority. Everything connected to the supposed spills would now belong to him. I had insisted on one condition. The agreement stated that Grant accepted direct responsibility for every operational decision made during the 30-day period. Any change to fuel systems, environmental records, emergency procedures, or remote equipment required his written authorization. He had accepted the condition without hesitation. He thought I wanted a shield from liability. In reality, I was removing his ability to blame me. The attorney placed the document on a portable work table. Elise signed first, then Grant. His signature was clean and confident, the kind of signature made by a man who believed paperwork existed to serve him. I signed last. A tremor passed through my hand near the end of my surname. This time, I did not have to pretend. I was giving a stranger control over the marina Samuel and I had built. Grant closed the folder. "Thank you, Nora," he said. "This is the responsible decision." I looked at him with the tired expression I had practiced in my bathroom mirror. "I hope you can save it." "I will." He believed that too. Within an hour, changes began. My office computer was removed for what Grant called a security review. Samuel's files were packed into labeled crates and transferred to the administration trailer. My name remained on the office door, but Grant moved into the room and began holding meetings behind the glass. I carried a cardboard box toward the small cottage at the edge of the property. It contained 3 framed photographs: Samuel's brass-tied clock, a spare sweater, and several blank notebooks. Workers watched me cross the yard. Some looked embarrassed. Others offered sympathetic smiles. Only Dana looked angry. She followed me into the cottage and closed the door. "What are you doing?" she whispered. "Resting. Do not insult me." I placed the tide clock on the kitchen counter. Its hands had stopped at 11:17, the time Samuel died. I had never repaired it. Grant needs to believe he is one. Dana's anger shifted into fear. "Has he?" "Not yet." I showed her the written responsibility clause and told her to make copies of every directive Grant issued. "Do not take originals," I warned. "Do not access anything you are not authorized to see. If he changes a schedule, requests a report, moves equipment, or orders someone to bypass a procedure, document the time and who was present." "What are you looking for?" "The moment he stops creating a story and begins creating the next accident." She stared at me. "You think another spill is coming? I know someone already wrote the claim." Her face lost color. I told her only what she needed to know: the email, the future date, the cleanup estimate, nothing about Mara or the laboratory result. The fewer people who carried the full truth, the less Grant could extract if he became suspicious. By afternoon, I walked through the marina as though I no longer understood where I belonged. I asked a mechanic whether the fuel dock was open, even though a red closure sign hung behind him. I called Grant Graham during a meeting. I spent 10 minutes searching for cottage keys already resting in my hand. Each mistake traveled quickly. By sunset, Colin no longer lowered his voice when I approached. That evening, I sat inside the dark cottage with the lights off and watched Grant's office through binoculars. At 9:20, Elise left alone. At 9:43, Colin entered through the side door. Grant closed the blinds, but one narrow gap remained. I could see them standing over a map of the marina. Colin pointed toward the outer fuel line. Grant shook his head and moved his finger toward the service basin, then to the storm drain channel beside Sea Pier. I could not hear them through the glass. Then Colin opened the office door to leave. The wind carried Grant's final words across the empty yard. "Do it before the storm," he said. "This time, make sure there is no marina left to save." Grant's words crossed the yard so clearly that for one reckless second, I wanted to confront him. Instead, I lowered the binoculars. If I walked into his office with nothing but something the wind had carried to me, he would deny it. Colin would support him. Elise would say I had misheard. By morning, my accusation would become another example of confusion. So I stayed in the dark. At 10:07, Colin's truck left the marina. Grant remained in Samuel's office another 20 minutes, then carried a document case to his car. I recorded the times in one of the blank notebooks from my cardboard box. At 10:41, I called Mara. "He is planning the next incident before the storm," I said. "What exactly did you hear?" I repeated Grant's words. "Did anyone else hear them?" "No." "Then treat it as intelligence, not evidence. I know the difference. You knew the difference when you put harbor sludge in a freezer bag too." "I let that pass. We need the claim metadata. I have spoken with Chesapeake Mutual's fraud unit," she said. "Their investigator will meet us tomorrow morning." At 8 the next morning, Mara and I entered a windowless conference room inside Chesapeake Mutual's Baltimore office. A woman named Tessa Ward was waiting with 2 laptops and the expression of someone who had learned never to trust a polished explanation. Tessa ran the company's Special Investigations Unit. "Mr. Hale told me you deny both pollution events," she said. "I deny causing the first one. The second has not happened. Tessa opened a file. The preliminary notice was created inside our claims portal, using credentials assigned to Grant Vale. Can you prove when? We can prove more than that. She rotated the laptop toward us. The future claim had been created at 2:14 a.m. on September 28th. Its listed incident time was 8:20 p.m. on September 29th. Grant had also drafted a separate report before the first spill. The portal had preserved its autosave history. At 8:03 p.m., he wrote that emergency crews had deployed containment boom along Sea Pier. At 8:17, he inserted a cleanup estimate of $286,000. At 8:31 he added, Operator Whitaker appeared confused and instructed staff to avoid regulatory notification. The spill alarm did not ring until 4:47 the following morning. He wrote the response before the event, Mara said. Tessa nodded, and he knew the contractor, estimated cost, and area of contamination. Bay Shield Recovery, I said. They confirmed that the estimate number belongs to a proposal created 11 days ago. Who requested it? A company called Harbor Renewal Partners. Tessa searched a corporate registry database. The company had been formed in Delaware 4 months earlier. Its manager was another limited liability company, controlled by Vale Coastal Redevelopment. Grant had not merely found a buyer. Grant was the buyer, the appraisal, the canceled policy, the invented spill, the 7-day loan default. Each step was designed to lower the marina's value while increasing the pressure on me to sell. What does he gain? Mara asked. Tessa opened another document. Harbor Renewal Partners signed a development option with Meridian Quay Hospitality. If the company delivers clear title to Whitaker Landing before October 7th, Meridian pays an acquisition premium of $12 million. October 7th was 2 days after the storm was expected to pass. Our bank cure period ended October 5th. Grant planned to force the marina into default, purchase it cheaply through his shell company, and transfer the waterfront rights to a hotel consortium before the option expired. If he failed, the agreement required repayment of a $3 million advance. Does he still have the advance? I asked. We do not know. Tessa said. He does not. Mara turned toward me. What makes you say that? Desperate men do not stage environmental crimes when they can simply return the money. Tessa closed one file. There is a problem. The portal records establish pre-planning, but Grant may claim he created hypothetical drafts as emergency preparation. With false statements about me, he can call them possible scenarios. The cleanup proposal is suspicious, but Harbor Renewal Partners is legally separate from Vale Coastal, despite the ownership chain. He wants another spill, I said. Then we need him to create it under conditions we can document. I looked at Mara. She knew what I was considering. No, she said. If he damages the outer fuel line during a storm, people could die. Then we do not let fuel reach the line. Tessa leaned forward. What are you proposing? We replace the active supply with an inert tracing fluid. We preserve the pump logs independently. We position authorized environmental observers nearby. Grant issues the orders, the controller records the commands, and nothing combustible reaches the water. Mara shook her head. That requires access permits and cooperation from people Grant supervises. Not everyone. I thought of Dana Ben and the mechanical bypass Samuel had installed before remote systems existed. Tessa did not approve the plan, but she did not reject it. I can involve environmental counsel and notify the appropriate authorities, she said. Nothing happens without legal oversight, agreed, and you do not confront Grant. I have no intention of doing that. When the meeting ended, Mara stopped beside my truck. You may be wrong about Elise, she said. Her signature is on the authorization, and she stood beside him while he tried to have me removed. That proves participation, not motive. Grant may be using fear, blackmail, or an old mistake against her. People sometimes help build the cage that eventually closes around them. I wanted to dismiss the possibility. Then my phone vibrated. Dana had sent a photograph from Samuel's office. Grant's document case was open on the desk. Inside was the agreement between Harbor Renewal Partners and Meridian Quay Hospitality. Across the top in red capital letters were the words, Delivery Deadline, October 7, no extension at the bottom. Beneath Grant's signature was a second signature. Elise's. I stared at Elise's signature until the letters lost their shape. It was not an electronic mark copied from an old authorization. It was a full handwritten signature, slanted slightly upward, with the small loop she had added to the final E since high school. She had signed Grant's development agreement willingly. For the first time since the spill, anger overpowered discipline. I called her, she answered in a whisper, "Aunt Nora." "Where are you?" "At home alone." A pause. "Yes, I am coming over." Mara caught my wrist before I opened the truck door. "No, her name is on the contract, I can read. She helped him sell the marina before he created the default. Or she signed a page without understanding the structure." "Elise is not stupid." I did not say she was. Mara stepped between me and the driver's door. "You are about to do exactly what Grant expects. You will arrive angry. Elise will become defensive. He will learn what you know, before we have preserved the evidence. She betrayed me, probably." The word struck harder than denial would have, Mara continued. "But there are different kinds of betrayal: greed, fear, coercion, shame, dependency. Sometimes people tell themselves they are protecting everyone, while they hand the weapon to the person destroying them." I looked back at the photograph on Dana's phone. "What do you suggest?" "We verify what Elise signed, when she signed it, and what Grant told her it was." Tessa arranged for a certified corporate records search, while Mara contacted an attorney who specialized in financial coercion and forged commercial instruments. I returned to the cottage and played the exhausted owner for another afternoon. At 4, Elise came to see me. She carried groceries. Grant had sent her, I was certain, but the gesture still cut through me. She placed soup, bread, fruit, and coffee on the narrow kitchen counter, then began putting things away without asking. "You should not be alone during the storm," she said. "I have lived through storms before. This one may flood the property. So may the next accident." Her hand stopped inside the cupboard. "I do not know what you mean." I sat at the table. "Of course not." She turned slowly. There were shadows beneath her eyes. For the first time, I noticed a faint bruise near the inside of her wrist, partly hidden beneath her sleeve. "Not proof, only a detail. Grant says the bank may sell the property before the week is over," she said. "Grant says many things. He is trying to preserve some value for whom?" "For all of us." I let the silence stretch. "Did you sign an agreement with Meridian Quay Hospitality?" Her face changed before she answered. "Not surprise, fear. I signed preliminary planning documents." "What kind?" "A development option. It was only supposed to become active if the bank forced a sale." "Why did you not tell me?" "Because you would have refused to discuss it. It is my marina. It is also the only family asset large enough to save us." The words came out too quickly. "Save you from what?" She looked toward the window. "Grant's business has been under pressure." "How much pressure?" "I do not know the exact number. That is a lie." Her eyes filled. "He borrowed money to keep Vail Coastal operating. Several projects failed. Investors threatened lawsuits. Then Meridian offered an advance if he secured a waterfront development site." "How much?" $3 million. "And where is it?" "I do not know." "You signed the contract. He told me it was a conditional family consent form." "Did you read it?" She said nothing. I felt the old anger return, but beneath it was something worse. Disappointment. "You signed away Samuel's Harbor without reading the document." "I trusted my husband." "No, you chose not to know." She flinched. The sentence hurt both of us because it was true. Elise sat across from me. "Grant said no one would lose anything. He said the insurance issues would only force a restructuring. You would receive enough money to live comfortably. The workers would be rehired by the hotel. A hotel does not need diesel mechanics and charter captains. He said the marina was dying anyway, and you believed him." I believed he understood things I did not. Her sleeve had slipped back. The bruise was shaped like fingers. I looked at it. She pulled the fabric down. "Did Grant do that?" "No." The answer was immediate, too immediate. Before I could press her, a car door closed outside. Elise stood so quickly that the chair scraped the floor. Grant entered without knocking. "There you are," he said. His smile was warm. His eyes moved from Elise to me, then to the groceries. "I was worried when you did not answer. My phone was in the car." Elise said. Grant placed a hand on her shoulder. She became very still. "We should let Nora rest." He looked at me. "The bank has agreed to delay formal action until after the Harbor Safety Commission reviews the second incident. The incident that has not happened." His smile remained. The potential incident. He guided Elise toward the door. As she passed me, something slipped from her coat pocket and landed beneath the table. Neither of them noticed. I waited until their car had left the property before picking it up. It was a hotel key card from a Baltimore airport hotel. On the paper sleeve, someone had written a room number and tomorrow's date. Beneath that was a short message in Elise's handwriting. If anything happens to me, ask Grant why he made me sign Nora's name. I called Mara and read the note aloud. Do not contact Elise again, she said. Preserve the card. Photograph it where you found it. That night, Dana texted that Grant and Colin were meeting in Samuel's office. I crossed the yard through the rain and stopped beneath the partly open side window. Colin's voice came first. What if they trace the signature? Grant answered without hesitation. They will trace it to Elise. She used Nora's credentials. She signed the bank papers and she approved the sale. If this falls apart, she takes the signature charge. We walk away. My first assumption had been wrong. Elise was guilty of helping Grant. But Grant had already chosen her as the body he would leave behind. The words I heard through Samuel's window changed the fight. Until then, I had been trying to save the marina and prove Grant had engineered the spills. Now I understood that Elise was not merely trapped inside his plan. She had been chosen as its disposable part. I returned to the cottage without letting either man see me. Mara arrived before dawn with environmental attorney David Chen and Tessa Ward from Chesapeake Mutual. We sat around the kitchen table while rain ticked against the windows. I placed the hotel key card inside an evidence sleeve and gave them my notes from Grant and Colin's conversation. David read everything twice. You cannot build the case around what you overheard, he said. I was outside my own office. That does not automatically make a private conversation admissible. More importantly, it does not prove environmental fraud. I did not record it. That may help, but we build this as though you heard nothing. Mara nodded. A strong case should survive without its most dramatic fact. Tessa opened her laptop. We preserved the claims portal metadata, the Bay Shield proposal, and the ownership link between Harbor Renewal Partners and Vail Coastal. That establishes preparation and financial motive, not the act itself, I said. Correct. David drew 4 columns on a legal pad. Opportunity, control, physical evidence, false statements. Grant now had formal authority over the fuel systems. The temporary agreement made him responsible for operational decisions. What we still needed were properly collected samples, authenticated controller logs, and a version of events he could not later change. The hearing, I said. David nodded. The Harbor Safety Commission can request a sworn chronology from every person with operational responsibility. If Grant lies, he creates a new problem for himself. And if he tells the truth, Tessa almost smiled. Then he admits enough to lose the marina scheme. We designed a plan that depended less on surprise than discipline. Mara would arrange an independent inspection under the insurer's authority. Inspectors would collect baseline samples from the fuel dock, sea pier, the storm drain channel, and the outer harbor. Every jar would be sealed, photographed, timed, and signed by 2 witnesses. Tessa would preserve the insurance portal and Bay Shield communications. David would notify Commissioner Lena Brooks that evidence suggested a deliberate pollution event might occur before the hearing. He would not accuse Grant by name. He would request temporary monitoring measures under seal. The difficult part was the remote controller. Grant believed it gave him control over the fuel system from anywhere. We needed it to preserve every command without alerting him. Ben knew the equipment better than anyone except Colin. I found him in the repair shed shortly after 7. He was organizing socket sets, though his eyes kept moving toward the office windows. I need to ask you something, I said. If Colin sees us talking again, I lose my job. You may lose more than that if the next incident happens. He set down his wrench. I told him an independent inspection was being prepared. I did not mention Elise, the development contract, or the hotel key card. Can the HarborSafe controller store remote commands? Yes. Device ID, user account, time, valve position, flow request. Can those logs be erased from the dashboard, from the unit itself? There is an internal diagnostic chip. It keeps the last 500 commands, even after a reset. Can you copy it without changing anything? not without opening the housing. Would Colin notice if he checks the security seal? Mara had anticipated that, by noon, Commissioner Brooks approved a limited emergency preservation order. It allowed a certified marine technician to mirror the diagnostic memory, because the equipment might contain harbor safety evidence. The technician arrived in an unmarked van. Grant had left for a bank meeting, and Colin was supervising storm shutters. Ben led him to the fuel cabinet. Donna stood nearby as records witness. Mara photographed each step and maintained a written log. The factory seal was cut. The diagnostic chip was copied. The technician installed a read-only bridge between the controller and its network antenna. From that moment, every remote instruction would be duplicated onto an encrypted recorder controlled by the Commission. Nothing in the operating system was changed or disabled. Grant could still issue commands. He simply could not make them disappear. The technician replaced the housing and applied a new manufacturer seal, matching the original in color and dimensions. Unless someone examined the serial code, the cabinet looked untouched. Next, Mara's team collected baseline samples under Grant's own safety procedures. That detail mattered. We wanted no argument that the inspection violated his authority. By 3, the samples were secured. By 4, Tessa confirmed Chesapeake Mutual had received another revised pollution claim from Grant's account. This version identified the storm drain channel as the point where diesel would enter the basin. The same place I had seen him indicate on the map. At 5, David asked the Harbor Safety Commission to require Grant, Colin, Elise, and me to provide sworn chronologies of the first spill, all fuel system modifications, every person with remote access, and all actions taken in anticipation of the predicted second incident. Commissioner Brooks approved the request within the hour. Grant received it inside Samuel's office. From the cottage, I watched him read the notice. He did not appear frightened. He called Colin, then Elise, and began dictating. That was what we needed. A fixed story placed under oath before the next incident occurred. At 7:30, David called. Grant submitted his chronology. What does he claim? That the remote system was inactive before he became safety director. He says he never operated it personally, never instructed Colin to alter a fuel line, and had no advance knowledge of either pollution event. He signed that, under penalty of perjury. For the first time all day, I allowed myself to breathe. Then the cottage door opened without warning. Ben stepped inside, soaked from the rain. His face was pale. Colin opened the fuel cabinet, he said. He looked at the security seal. I stood. Did he notice? Ben swallowed. He wrote down the serial number. Ben's warning gave us less than a minute to decide. Go back to the repair shed, I told him. Do not ask Colin what he saw. Do not mention the serial number. What if he checks the manufacturer database? He will. Ben's face tightened. Then he will know the seal was replaced. He will know it is not the seal he remembers. That is different. Mara called the technician who had installed the Commission's read-only bridge. David instructed me not to touch the cabinet, remove the recorder, or alter the preservation order. Any sudden change would confirm that we were hiding something. So we did nothing. At 8:15, Colin left the fuel dock and entered Samuel's office. Grant arrived 12 minutes later. From the cottage window, I watched Colin place a photograph on the desk. Grant enlarged something on his computer, then closed the blinds. They knew the seal had changed. They did not yet know why. My phone vibrated. Donna had sent a message. Colin is asking who entered the maintenance archive yesterday. Then another appeared. The old paper ledger is missing. Samuel had kept an analog ledger for every major fuel system modification. It contained installation dates, serial numbers, contractor names, and handwritten notes dating back almost 20 years. Unlike the database, it could not be remotely edited. If Colin found it, he might remove the page showing that Grant's launch had received the matching controller. If Grant had taken it, he might know what we were trying to prove. I called Dana, who last saw the ledger. Colin says it was in the steel archive cabinet. Was the cabinet forced? No, only 4 people have keys. Who? You, Colin, me, and Samuel. Samuel's key had been in the top drawer of his desk since his death. Grant now used that desk. Do not accuse anyone, I said. Tell Colin you assumed he moved it during the reorganization. What if he asks whether you took it? Tell him I have been forgetting things. Dana went quiet. I hate saying that, so do I. At 10, Grant requested a staff meeting near the fuel dock. Rain drummed against the covered service bay, while Grant explained that someone had interfered with safety equipment and removed records during an environmental investigation. He did not name me. He did not have to. Colin held up a photograph of the new seal. This seal was not installed by Harbor Systems Integration, he said. If anyone accessed the cabinet, come forward now. No one spoke. Grant looked across the employees. Tampering with environmental equipment can lead to criminal liability. Secret actions, even well-intentioned ones, put every job here at risk. His gaze stopped on Ben, then it moved to me. Nora, do you remember opening the cabinet after you agreed to step back? Every face turned toward me. It was a test. If I denied it too firmly, I could expose my performance. If I admitted it, Grant could claim I had compromised the evidence. I looked at the cabinet. I may have. Grant's expression softened. Can you tell us why? I thought the fuel alarm was sounding. There was no alarm. I know that now. Colin stepped closer. Did you remove the maintenance ledger, the blue one? It is black. I pressed my fingers to my temple. I brought a ledger to the cottage. I do not remember which one. Grant and Colin exchanged a glance, exactly what I wanted. I will look for it, I said. I am sorry. Grant placed a hand lightly on my arm. You see why we are concerned. I nodded. Then I made the mistake we had planned. A storm preparation checklist rested on a work table. I picked it up, read the line for the eastern floating dock, and instructed 2 mechanics to loosen its storm chains. The instruction was obviously wrong. Before a surge, those chains had to be shortened. Colin corrected me immediately. I stared at the checklist as though the words had shifted. You are right, I whispered. The workers looked away. Grant relaxed. He believed the seal had been replaced by a confused old woman searching for an imaginary alarm. He believed the missing ledger might be buried in my cottage. Most importantly, he believed I no longer understood enough to threaten him. After the meeting, I noticed a dark sedan parked across the access road. A man inside held a camera with a long lens. Grant was no longer relying on Colin's eyes. He was having me watched. That afternoon, Elise tried to visit. Grant intercepted her near the parking lot. I could not hear him, but I saw him take her phone, scroll through it, and return it only after she began crying. She never reached my cottage. At 3:30, Mara confirmed that the preservation recorder remained active. The controller had received no new command, but someone had tried twice to access its diagnostic menu using Colin's credentials. They are looking for the copied logs, she said. Can they find the bridge? Not from the dashboard. What about physically? If they dismantle the housing? The storm was less than 48 hours away. At 5, I searched the cottage in full view of the surveillance car. I opened closets, moved boxes, and carried 3 irrelevant binders outside. Then I brought Grant the wrong ledger, a faded slip rental book from 12 years earlier. He accepted it with patient disappointment. The performance bought us time. It did not buy enough. Ben's shift began at 6. At 6:20, Dana called to say he had not arrived. At 6:35, his phone went directly to voicemail. By 7, rain was falling so hard that the dock lights blurred into pale circles. I found Ben's camera bag beside an empty service slip at the far end of Sea Pier. The bag was open, the camera was gone, and in the dark water below, something struck the underside of the dock. Something struck the underside of the dock again, not driftwood. The sound was too hollow and too regular, followed by the scrape of fiberglass against a piling. I dropped to my knees and aimed my flashlight between the wet boards. A small white service boat moved beneath me, rising and falling with the chop. Its engine was off. Its bowline had wrapped around a piling, holding the vessel sideways against the current. Ben, I shouted. No answer. Rain poured from the edge of my hood and struck the black water below. I ran toward the ladder at the end of Sea Pier, nearly losing my footing on the slick planks. The service boat slammed against the dock a 3rd time. Through the open rear deck, I saw a pale hand. I called Mara as I climbed down. Ben is aboard one of the service boats. He may be injured. Call emergency services and harbor patrol. Do not enter alone. I am already on the ladder. Nora, I put the phone in my coat pocket and jumped. The deck shifted violently beneath my boots. Water covered my ankles and surged forward each time the stern dropped. The vessel was sinking slowly, held above the surface only by the line tangled around the piling. Ben lay on his side beside the center console. Blood ran from a cut near his temple. His shirt was soaked. One wrist was twisted behind him beneath a loose coil of rope. I knelt and touched his neck, pulse weak but steady. Ben, can you hear me? His eyelids moved. Nora, I'm here. He tried to lift his head, then winced. The boat, he whispered. It's filling. I noticed water rushed through the lower compartment beneath the rear bench. I opened the hatch and found the bilge nearly full. The automatic pump was silent. The manual switch produced nothing. I followed the wiring with my flashlight. Someone had pulled the alarm fuse and cut the pump lead near the battery housing. That alone would have caused flooding in heavy rain. But the water was rising too quickly. I searched the compartment and found the seawater intake valve fully open. Its hose had been loosened just enough to allow a continuous stream into the hull. This was not storm damage. Someone had turned the boat into a slow trap. I closed the valve, then used my knife to strip the damaged pump wire. Samuel had taught me never to trust one electrical connection at sea. I joined the copper ends, wrapped them with tape from the emergency kit, and pressed the manual switch. The pump coughed once, then water began pouring overboard. Above us, voices shouted from the dock. Mara had arrived with 2 harbor patrol officers and paramedics. They lowered a rescue sling while I untangled Ben's wrist. A purple mark circled it. Someone had restrained him. We lifted him onto the dock just as a strong gust shoved the service boat hard against the piling. One of the officers secured a second line before it could break free. The paramedics placed Ben on a stretcher beneath the repair shed awning. He was conscious now, but disoriented. What happened? An officer asked him. Ben looked toward the parking lot. The dark surveillance sedan was gone. I came down to get my camera, he said. Someone hit me from behind. Did you see who? No, his eyes found mine, but I know why. The paramedic asked him to remain still. Ben ignored her. I recorded Colin 2 nights ago doing what? Working near the storm drain channel. He had a portable tank and a bypass hose. Grant was standing near the fuel dock. My mind returned to the meeting I had watched through the office blinds. Is the video on the missing camera? The camera was empty. He swallowed painfully. I moved the memory card. Where? I didn't trust keeping it in my bag after Colin asked about my class recordings. A harbor officer leaned closer. Where did you put it? Ben looked at me instead of answering him. Samuel's old ledger. For a moment the rain seemed to stop. The missing black ledger? He nodded. There was a split in the back cover. I slid the card inside and put the book in the equipment locker beside the launch ramp. That locker was empty yesterday. Ben's expression changed. Then someone found it. Who knew you used that locker? Only Colin. He gave me the key when I started making repair videos. The paramedics lifted the stretcher. As they carried him toward the ambulance, Ben gripped my sleeve. The card shows the hose, it shows Grant, and I think it shows the name on the portable tank. We will find it. His hand tightened. Colin said if I kept asking questions, he would make sure no marina on the bay hired me. You did the right thing. I almost got killed for it. There was no answer I could give that would make that fair. The ambulance pulled away as thunder rolled over the harbor. Mara stood beside me, rain dripping from her silver hair. The official forecast changed, she said. The storm accelerated overnight. The leading edge reaches Annapolis before dawn. We were supposed to have another day. We do not. David Chen arrived 20 minutes later with Commissioner Brooks. Harbor Patrol sealed the service boat and fuel dock as potential crime scenes. The severed pump wire, removed fuse, loosened intake hose, and restraints were photographed and logged. For the first time, the investigation no longer concerned only money or property. Someone had tried to drown a 19-year-old apprentice. Grant arrived while the officers were securing the area. He rushed toward us wearing a raincoat over evening clothes. What happened? His concern was convincing, perhaps because part of it was real. Grant had planned controlled damage, not a body. Ben's injury threatened everything. Commissioner Brooks stopped him before he reached the boat. You are the acting safety director. Yes, then you will remain available for questioning. Grant looked at me. What was Nora doing aboard the vessel? She saved the young man inside it, Brooks replied. The answer silenced him. Colin did not come to the marina. He stopped answering calls shortly after Ben was found. At 10:30, Harbor Patrol officers went to his house. His truck was gone, his phone had been turned off. David gathered Mara, Tessa, Dana, and me inside the administration trailer. "We have a compromised witness, a missing recording, an accelerated storm, and a suspect who may be fleeing," he said. "Grant will argue that Colin acted alone. He already prepared that defense," I replied. Commissioner Brooks entered, carrying a printed notice. "The commission cannot wait until after the storm," she said. "With coverage suspended and an acting safety director under investigation, we need an emergency determination before conditions become dangerous." She handed the notice to David. The Harbor Safety Commission hearing had been moved forward. Instead of 2 days from now, it would begin at 8 the following morning. I looked through the trailer window at the rain sweeping across Samuels Harbor. We had less than 10 hours to find the ledger, recover Ben's recording, secure the marina, and prepare a case that Grant had spent months building his defense against. Then Dana opened the equipment inventory on her tablet. "There is one place Colin may have moved the ledger," she said. "Where?" She turned the screen toward me. Grant's private launch. Grant's private launch was still in its slip. From the administration trailer, I could see its white hull rising and falling against the dock while rain swept across the harbor. The vessel looked harmless in the darkness, but the controller part found in our fuel system had come from that boat. If Colin had moved Samuel's ledger anywhere, Grant's launch was the most logical place. It was also private property. David Chen read the answer on my face before I spoke. "No one boards without lawful authority. Ben's recording may be inside. Then Harbor Patrol can request consent or seek a warrant. By the time they get one, Grant may move the boat." Commissioner Brooks looked through the window. "He cannot legally depart during an active harbor safety inquiry. He has ignored laws before," Mara said. Brooks made 2 calls. Within 30 minutes, a Harbor Patrol officer sealed the launch's access gate and posted a written preservation notice. No one could move or enter the vessel without authorization. That protected the boat. It did not recover the memory card. At 1:20 in the morning, Grant appeared outside the trailer with Elise beside him. He pounded once on the door. "What authority do you have to seize my vessel?" Brooks opened the door but did not invite him inside. "No one has seized it. The launch is being preserved pending a warrant request." "Based on what?" "A witness statement, equipment records, and an attempted homicide investigation." Elise's face went white. "Attempted homicide?" Grant turned toward her. "Ben was injured in a storm. Nora is turning it into another conspiracy. He was found on a sinking boat with the bilge alarm disabled," I said. Grant looked at me. "And you happened to find him." The implication was so ugly that even Elise recoiled. "Stop," she whispered. Grant ignored her. "You have spent days creating confusion, interfering with equipment, removing records, and frightening employees. Now a young man is injured, and somehow you are the hero again." Commissioner Brooks stepped between us. "Mr. Vale, you will have an opportunity to make your statement at 8. Grant's attention moved to the notice on his launch. Then to Elise. "Come with me." She did not move. His expression remained calm, but one hand closed around her upper arm. "Now," Elise looked at me. For a second, I thought she would ask for help. Instead, she lowered her eyes and followed him into the rain. At 3:30, Harbor Patrol received emergency authorization to search the launch for evidence connected to Ben's attack and the environmental investigation. The search took 40 minutes. Officers found the missing black maintenance ledger inside a locked storage compartment beneath the aft bench. Several pages had been torn out. The split in the back cover was empty. Ben's memory card was gone. They also found 2 portable fuel tanks, 3 coils of bypass hose, industrial flushing solvent, and a toolkit containing unused security seals identical to the one Colin had examined. Useful evidence, not the recording we needed. Grant's attorney immediately claimed the equipment was standard marine maintenance material, and that Colin had access to the launch. By dawn, Grant's defense was clear. Colin had acted alone. Nora had become confused. Elise had tried to protect the family. Grant had merely responded to a crisis he did not create. At 7:45, we entered the Harbor Safety Commission chamber. The room overlooked the gray harbor through tall windows. Rain ran down the glass in crooked lines, reporters occupied the back row, marina employees filled the public seats, several charter captains stood along the walls, their weatherproof jackets still wet from securing their boats. Grant sat at the petitioner's table with two attorneys. Elise sat beside him. She wore a dark green dress and held her hands tightly in her lap. Makeup covered the bruise on her wrist, but not completely. Colin's chair was empty. I sat across the aisle with David and Mara. On the table before us were the official water sample reports, controller logs, insurance metadata, the temporary management agreement, photographs from Grant's launch, and the hotel keycard containing Elise's message. Not enough for certainty. Enough for a fight. Commissioner Brooks called the hearing to order. Grant's attorney spoke first. He described me as a respected founder who had become overwhelmed by bereavement, regulatory pressure, and rapid technological change. He praised my decades of service before arguing that admiration could not substitute for present competence. It was a careful destruction. Every compliment prepared the audience to accept my removal. Then Grant testified. He said he had agreed to help only after repeated safety failures. He claimed I resisted modernization, interfered with emergency equipment, removed records, and issued contradictory storm instructions. He described finding me confused at the fuel cabinet. He described my mistake with the dock chains. He described the first spill as an avoidable accident made worse by my refusal to accept responsibility. Then he turned toward Ben's injury. I believe Mrs. Whitaker's campaign of suspicion created an atmosphere of fear and disorder, he said. Mr. Ortiz may have entered the service vessel while searching for records she encouraged him to collect. His attorney asked whether Grant had ever instructed anyone to alter a fuel system, create a spill, or harm Ben. No. Did you access the remote controller before becoming temporary safety director? No. Did you know a second pollution event would occur? No. Did you attempt to sell Whitaker Landing for personal benefit? No. I sought a contingency buyer to protect employees and creditors. Each answer was calm. Each answer was sworn. Then Elise was called. She walked to the witness table, like someone moving through deep water. Grant's attorney handed her a written declaration. Mrs. Vale, is this your signature? Yes. Did you prepare this statement voluntarily? Her eyes moved toward Grant. Yes, please explain your concerns about Mrs. Whitaker. Elise began reading. She described my sleeplessness after Samuel's death. Forgotten conversations, misplaced tools, repeated questions, suspicion of staff, my decision to interfere with the controller installation. Then she reached the final paragraph. In my opinion, Eleanor Whitaker is no longer capable of protecting herself, the marina, or the people who work there. I support the immediate suspension of her operational authority and the transfer of emergency management to my husband, Grant Vale. The room remained silent. I had raised Elise from childhood. I had held her after nightmares, taught her to drive, paid her tuition, and stood beside her at her wedding. Now her signature was being used to remove me from the place Samuel and I had built. Commissioner Brooks asked whether I wished to respond. I stood slowly. Grant watched me with patient confidence. He believed Elise's statement had finished me. I carried the sealed Coast Guard evidence bag to the clerk's desk and placed it beside her declaration. For this commission gives Grant Vale my harbor, I said. I would like him to explain why his insurance claim was written 6 hours before the first spill began. Grant's smile disappeared. Behind him, the chamber doors opened. Tessa Ward entered carrying a laptop and a certified claims archive. Tessa Ward walked to the evidence table without looking at Grant. She placed the certified claims archive beside the sealed Coast Guard bag, opened her laptop, and connected it to the hearing room display. Grant's attorney rose immediately. Commissioner, we object to the introduction of undisclosed insurance records without adequate foundation. Tessa remained standing. These records were produced by Chesapeake Mutual in response to an emergency commission request. They are certified copies from the company's claims system, including preserved metadata and autosave history. Commissioner Brooks looked toward David. Was opposing counsel notified that insurance records might be presented? David nodded. They received notice last night that the claims chronology was under review. Grant's attorney glanced at his papers. He had been notified. He simply had not understood what we possessed. Brooks overruled the objection. Tessa entered her credentials. The display showed a claim file associated with Whitaker Landing, created under Grant Vale's authorized account. The room became quieter. "This is the first pollution claim," Tessa said. The final submission occurred at 5:12 a.m., 25 minutes after the alarm was reported. However, the claims portal preserved earlier drafts automatically. She opened the first timestamp, 8:03 p.m., the evening before the spill. The draft already identified Sea Pier as the contamination zone. At 8:17, Grant's account inserted the exact cleanup estimate later provided by Bay Shield Recovery. At 8:31, the account added a statement claiming that I appeared confused and ordered staff to delay regulatory notification. The words appeared on the wall for everyone to read. Grant leaned toward his attorney and whispered rapidly. His attorney stood again. "A draft is not proof of an event. My client may have been preparing hypothetical emergency scenarios based on known vulnerabilities." Tessa did not react. She opened the next file. The claim also listed the deployment of containment boom along Sea Pier. Ben had not rung the alarm until the following morning. No containment boom had been deployed when the sentence was written. Grant's attorney shifted strategies. Mr. Vale did not personally type every document created under a shared business account. Tessa looked directly at Grant. The account was not shared. It required two-factor authentication through a device registered to Mr. Vale. Grant raised his hands. "My phone was accessible to staff during the emergency." The authentication occurred the night before the emergency. His expression tightened. Tessa continued. "The login originated from the wireless network aboard a vessel registered to Grant Vale. The vessel is named Second Chance." A low murmur moved through the public seats. Commissioner Brooks struck her gavel once. Grant leaned toward the microphone. "Colin Mercer had access to my launch. He may have used my phone or copied my credentials without permission." "It was the defense we expected." David stood. "Then the commission should examine the fuel controller records." Mara opened the Coast Guard evidence bag. Inside was not a dramatic object, only a certified storage device containing the mirrored diagnostic history of the harbor safe controller. She handed it to the clerk along with the preservation order, technician affidavit, photographs, and chain of custody forms. Grant's attorney objected again. This time, Brooks allowed him to question Mara before admitting the records. He tried to suggest that I had tampered with the device. Mara answered without defensiveness. "Mrs. Whitaker did not open the controller housing. A certified technician accessed it under a commission order. I photographed the factory seal before removal, witnessed the memory extraction, and signed the replacement seal record." "Was the device operating normally?" "Yes." "Could commands be issued remotely?" "Yes." "Could a user conceal his identity?" "On the dashboard, perhaps." "Not on the diagnostic chip." The attorney paused. "Explain." "The dashboard displays usernames. The chip also records the hardware identifier of the device sending the command. A person may change an account name. Changing the identifier embedded in a physical communications device is substantially more difficult." Brooks admitted the records. The clerk connected the storage device to the display. A chronological table appeared. The first entry that mattered was dated 3 days before Grant became temporary safety director. Remote access request, valve test command, manual override. The registered username had been deleted. The hardware identifier remained. Mara opened a second certified record from Harbor Systems Integration. The identifier belonged to the communications module installed on Grant's private launch. Grant stared at the screen. His attorney spoke first. "Again, Colin Mercer had access to that vessel." David nodded. "That is possible." Grant's attorney looked briefly relieved. Then David changed the display. The controller had not received only one command. It had received 11. Several occurred while Colin's employee access card showed him inside the marina repair shed. One occurred while Colin was captured on the marina gate camera driving off the property. At the same time, Grant's launch was recorded by harbor traffic sensors moving near the outer service channel. Another command occurred during the exact period Grant claimed he was attending a lender meeting in Baltimore. Tessa displayed a parking receipt from the lender's garage. Grant's vehicle never entered. His attorney requested a recess. Commissioner Brooks denied it. David approached the witness table. Mr. Vale, you testified that you never accessed the controller before accepting temporary authority. That is correct. You also submitted a sworn chronology stating that the remote system was inactive. That was my understanding. Do you now claim that Colin Mercer operated your vessel, used its communications module, accessed your insurance account, prepared advanced pollution claims, and issued 11 remote fuel system commands without your knowledge? Grant's face reddened. I claim he had access and opportunity, all while you happened to control the company that would profit from the marina's forced sale. I did not control the buyer. Tessa opened the Delaware Ownership Registry, Harbor Renewal Partners, Vale Coastal Redevelopment, Grant Vale. The chain appeared on the screen. Grant's attorney stopped taking notes. Commissioner Brooks turned toward Grant. Did you disclose this ownership interest when you proposed the distressed sale? Grant looked at Elise. She sat rigid beside him. No, he said. Why not? Because the transaction was preliminary. David placed the Meridian Quay agreement before the clerk. Preliminary agreements do not usually include $3 million advances and $12 million delivery premiums. Grant pushed back from the microphone. This hearing concerns safety, not a private development contract. It concerns motive, Brooks replied. Mara then introduced the independently collected environmental samples. The second supervised sample contained the same unusual combination found in my unofficial freezer bag sample: marine diesel, tubotoxyethanol, and a specific corrosion inhibitor. A matching container had been recovered from Grant's launch. His attorney stood. Commercial solvents are common aboard marine vessels. Mara agreed. So are ropes. That does not make every rope identical. She displayed the laboratory comparison. The inhibitor profile, dilution ratio, and trace dye were consistent across the harbor sample and the container from Second Chance. Grant no longer looked at the commission. He looked toward the exit. Commissioner Brooks ordered the doors secured. Then Tessa opened one final folder. This is the creation history for the second pollution claim, she said. The event described in this file has still not occurred. The display showed tomorrow's date, the storm drain channel, 3 response vessels, and a projected cleanup cost. At the bottom was a note added by Grant's account. Finalize after Colin confirms line is open. Grant's composure. Finally I cracked. That note was planted. Tessa looked at him. The system preserved it 12 hours before Colin disappeared. From the back row, the chamber doors opened again. 2 harbor patrol officers entered. Between them walked Colin Mercer, soaked, exhausted, and wearing handcuffs. He lifted his head and looked straight at Grant. I am done taking the fall for you, he said. Colin Mercer stopped 3 steps inside the chamber. Rainwater darkened his jacket, mud streaked one trouser leg. The handcuffs held his wrists close to his waist, but it was not the steel that made him look small. It was Grant. Commissioner Brooks ordered the officers to bring him to the witness table. Grant's attorney objected before Colin sat down. My client has not been advised of any agreement between Mr. Mercer and law enforcement. Harbor Patrol Captain Reeves stepped forward. There is no agreement. Mr. Mercer was located at a motel outside Easton. During transport, he requested to make a statement. Brooks looked at Colin. Are you willing to testify under oath? Yes. Has anyone promised you leniency? No. Have you spoken with Mrs. Whitaker since your arrest? No. His eyes moved toward me. I should have listened to her. Grant leaned toward his microphone. This man is desperate. Colin turned. You told me you would protect me. I told you to follow lawful procedures. You told me the first spill would only trigger an insurance review. You said no one would get hurt. David asked Colin to describe the first incident. He admitted installing the spare harbor-safe controller from Grant's launch inside the marina cabinet. He attached a bypass line near Sea Pier and released a mixture from a portable tank shortly after 2 in the morning. Why use flushing solvent? Mara asked. Grant wanted the laboratory to identify fuel system contamination. He said ordinary diesel might be blamed on a passing boat. Who prepared the insurance claim? Grant, who forged Nora Whitaker's initials. I did. The admission landed harder than I expected. Colin looked at me. I copied them from old inspection sheets. I said nothing. Regret offered after exposure is often only fear wearing cleaner clothes. Colin then admitted. Grant ordered him to open the storm drain line before the storm surge. The remote controller would release fuel, while Grant documented a supposed equipment failure. The damage would force the insurer to deny coverage permanently. "And Ben Ortiz?" David asked. Colin's face collapsed. "I saw him recording near the drain. What did you do?" "I told him to erase it. He said he had already backed it up. So you attacked him?" "I followed him to the service boat. I only wanted the camera. Why was the bilge alarm disabled?" Colin covered his face. "Grant said Ben needed to be frightened badly enough to leave Annapolis. He told me to make the boat look neglected, like Ben had gone aboard during the storm and made a mistake." Grant stood. "That is a lie." Colin looked up. "You cut the pump wire." A murmur moved through the room. Grant's attorney pulled him back into his seat. Colin said Grant struck Ben from behind and searched his camera bag. Colin loosened the seawater intake and tied Ben's wrist because Grant said the boy would wake too soon. "I thought the boat would flood slowly," Colin whispered. "I thought someone would find him." "You removed the black maintenance ledger," David said. "Yes, where is the memory card?" "I never found it." David looked toward the rear doors. Ben Ortiz entered on crutches, a white bandage near his temple. Beside him walked Dana, carrying Samuel's brass-tied clock. Dana placed it on the evidence table and turned it over. The wooden backing had been removed. Inside the hollow case, taped behind the stopped mechanism, was a black memory card. Ben approached the microphone. "I moved the card from the ledger when I realized Colin knew about the equipment locker. Mrs. Whitaker's cottage was being watched, so I hid it inside the clock before Grant's staff packed her belongings." "Why there?" Brooks asked. "Because no one cared about a clock that didn't work." The commission's technician inserted the card into a secured reader. The first videos showed ordinary repairs. Then the nighttime recording began. The image shook as Ben filmed from behind stacked crab traps. Colin appeared near the storm drain channel, carrying a portable tank. Grant stood beside him beneath the fuel dock light. Their voices were faint but clear. Grant instructed Colin to attach the bypass hose, wait until high tide, and release enough mixture to stain the inner pilings. Colin asked whether I would recognize the tide pattern. Grant laughed. "She can recognize whatever she wants. Elise has documented enough confusion to make no one believe her." Elise made a broken sound beside him. The video continued. Grant mentioned the insurer, the 7-day bank covenant, and the Meridian deadline. Then he said the sentence that ended every defense. "Once the default hits, Harbor Renewal buys the land, Meridian pays us, and Elise signs whatever I put in front of her." The screen went black. Grant turned toward Elise. "You knew about the sale. I knew about a contingency plan," she said. "I did not know about the spills. You signed the documents because you used Nora's electronic signature first and told me I would go to prison if I refused." His face changed. The gentle husband vanished. "You are already going to prison." Elise flinched, but this time she did not lower her eyes. She asked Commissioner Brooks for permission to amend her testimony. Then she admitted using my credentials on one bank document. She admitted signing the Meridian agreement without reading every page. She admitted lying about my memory because Grant threatened to place all responsibility on her. "I betrayed my aunt," she said. "I told myself I was protecting our marriage and the family from debt. But I was protecting my own fear." Grant pushed away from the table. "You ungrateful coward." Elise looked at him steadily. "No, I learned cowardice from living with you." Captain Reeves stepped behind Grant. The hearing room doors opened, and 2 state investigators entered carrying arrest warrants. Grant did not resist. He looked at me as they secured his wrists. "You think this saves the marina?" He said. "The bank still owns the debt. The insurance is still gone. You are still an old woman standing in the path of a storm." Commissioner Brooks waited until he was removed. Then she looked directly at me. "Mrs. Whitaker, the commission is prepared to restore your authority immediately. But you also submitted a sealed proposal for independent emergency receivership and worker oversight." The chamber became silent. "Do you want Whitaker Landing returned solely to you?" she asked. "Or placed into the new structure you designed?" I looked at Commissioner Brooks and understood that Grant's final mistake was believing the marina could only belong to one person. He thought ownership meant control. Samuel and I had once thought that too. For 40 years, we had treated Whitaker Landing as the reward for our sacrifice. But standing in that hearing room, surrounded by mechanics, dockhands, charter captains, investigators, and the young man who had nearly died protecting the truth, I saw the weakness in that idea. A family could betray one owner. It was harder to steal from an entire community. I want my operational authority restored, I said. But not solely to me. Grant's former attorneys exchanged glances. Reporters raised their phones. I continued. For the duration of the storm and the criminal investigation, I am requesting the independent receivership described in my sealed proposal. Commissioner Brooks will appoint a temporary safety board. Employees will retain their positions. No property may be sold, refinanced, or transferred without court approval. Brooks nodded. And after the emergency period, I intend to create a permanent worker ownership trust. A murmur moved through the marina employees. Donna covered her mouth. Ben lowered his head, overwhelmed. The decision did not erase what had happened, but it changed what could happen next. Commissioner Brooks restored my operator's license before noon. She appointed Mara as temporary chair of the marina's independent safety board and placed all fuel system access under dual control. No single person, not even me, could operate a transfer valve remotely without a second authorized approval. By the time we left the hearing room, the first storm bands had reached Annapolis. Justice had arrived. The weather did not care. We returned to Whitaker Landing beneath a sky the color of iron. Workers divided into teams. We secured travel lifts, doubled mooring lines, moved chemicals above projected flood level, and shut down the damaged fuel system completely. I worked beside them until my hands cramped. No one asked whether I was too old. At midnight, the storm surge pushed across the lower parking lot. Wind tore siding from the storage shed and snapped 2 floating dock hinges, but the marina held. Samuel had designed the oldest pilings to bend slightly under lateral pressure. Grant would have called that outdated construction. The flexibility saved us. At dawn, the harbor was covered with branches, broken planks, and floating debris. Whitaker Landing had lost 1 service shed, 6-finger piers, and part of the eastern seawall. But every employee was alive. Every vessel remained afloat. The marina was still ours. The criminal consequences began the following week. Grant Vail was charged with conspiracy, insurance fraud, attempted commercial fraud, forgery, environmental violations, reckless endangerment, and offenses connected to Ben's attack. Investigators also discovered that he had diverted most of Meridian Quay's $3 million advance into failed development projects and personal accounts. He had not created the marina scheme because he saw a brilliant opportunity. He had created it because he was already drowning. Colin faced similar charges, including assault and evidence tampering. Through his attorney, he agreed to cooperate with state and federal investigators. His testimony strengthened the case against Grant, but it did not erase the fact that he had forged my initials, contaminated the harbor, and helped place Ben inside a sinking boat. Cooperation could reduce a sentence. It could not restore trust. Chesapeake Mutual reinstated our coverage after its fraud unit formally concluded that the reported spills were deliberately staged by parties acting against the marina's interests. The company also withdrew the claim that I had concealed environmental damage. Severn Commercial suspended the loan default. David Chen argued that the covenant had been triggered through fraud by a person with undisclosed financial interest in the forced sale. After 3 weeks of negotiation and the threat of litigation, the bank agreed to restore the original payment schedule. Harbor Renewal Partners collapsed. Meridian Quay canceled the development option and sued Grant for the missing advance. The luxury hotel plans disappeared from Samuel's desk. The damage Grant caused did not vanish with them. Business had slowed. Several boat owners had moved elsewhere after seeing the pollution reports. Repairs after the storm consumed money we had reserved for winter payroll. Every inspection now took twice as long because no one trusted the old records. Reputation is like a wooden hull. One person can punch a hole in minutes. Repairing it requires finding every hidden crack. Elise was charged with unauthorized use of my electronic signature and making a false statement during a regulatory proceeding. Because she cooperated, corrected her testimony, and provided access to Grant's financial records, Prosecutors offered a reduced plea arrangement. She would avoid prison if the court accepted the agreement. She would face supervised probation, financial restitution, and hundreds of hours of community service. Some people at the marina believed that was too little. Others thought Grant had punished her enough. Neither opinion mattered as much as what happened between us. 3 weeks after the hearing, I visited Elise in the small apartment she rented after leaving Grant. She opened the door wearing jeans and an old college sweatshirt. Without Grant beside her, she appeared younger and more tired. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "I am sorry, the words were real. They were also insufficient." I entered and sat at a kitchen table made from inexpensive pressed wood. The apartment contained no artwork, no designer furniture, and no evidence of the life she had defended at my expense. "I knew signing those papers was wrong," she said. "I kept telling myself I would stop before anyone lost the marina." "You signed a statement saying I could not protect myself." Tears gathered in her eyes. "He said if I did not support him, he would send the forged bank documents to the police and say I created everything. You could have come to me. I was ashamed, so you made me carry the shame instead." She lowered her head. I wanted to comfort her. That was the most painful part. Love does not disappear when someone betrays you. It remains in the room, asking you to ignore what survival requires. "I do not know whether I can forgive you," I said. "I understand, no. You hope I will say that and then forgive you anyway." She cried quietly. I stood to leave. At the door she asked, "Will you ever call me your daughter again?" I looked at the woman I had raised and saw both the child I loved and the adult who had chosen fear over me. "I do not know." It was the truth. 6 weeks after the storm, I returned to Samuel's office before sunrise. The walls had been repaired. My old files had been restored. Grant's white architectural models were gone. On the desk sat Samuel's recovered black ledger, the brass tide clock, and a folder from David Chen. Inside was the finalized emergency receivership report. Beneath it lay a blank worker ownership trust agreement. A gold pen rested across the signature line. I signed the worker ownership trust at sunrise. There were no reporters in Samuel's office. David Chen stood beside the desk with Mara and Dana. Through the window, mechanics were already moving along the docks, checking electrical pedestals and clearing the last storm debris from the eastern slips. I used the same gold pen Grant had once expected me to use against myself. With one signature, 40% of Whitaker Landing passed into a permanent employee trust. The shares could not be sold to an outside developer or pledged as collateral for private debt. Employees earned participation through years of service, and major decisions required approval from an elected worker council and the ownership board. I retained enough authority to guide the marina while I was able. But no single widow, frightened niece, charming husband, or ambitious manager would ever again control every lock, signature, and valve. When I finished, Dana read the signature line. "You really did it," she said. "We did it." Mara corrected me. "No, you finally stopped trying to do everything yourself." I looked at her. "I preferred you when you only criticized my evidence bags." 9 months had passed since the hearing. Grant pleaded guilty shortly before trial, after prosecutors recovered deleted messages linking him to the staged spills and Ben's attack. He received a lengthy prison sentence, lost his professional licenses, and was ordered to repay money that no longer existed. Colin's cooperation reduced his sentence, but it did not spare him prison. He apologized to Ben, the marina workers, and me. Ben did not attend. He said he did not need to hear a man explain why fear had made him dangerous. Elise received 5 years of supervised probation, financial restitution, and 800 hours of community service. The court required counseling and prohibited her from handling another person's finances during that period. The sentence angered some people. I no longer measured justice by how completely another person was destroyed. Grant had confused punishment with victory. I refused to inherit that confusion. Elise began her community service at a waterfront food program in Annapolis. For 4 months, she did not visit Whitaker Landing. She sent one handwritten letter each week. She never asked me to forgive her. She wrote about what she had done, what she had ignored, and the excuses she had used to remain comfortable. She described how Grant isolated her one decision at a time. She also admitted that manipulation did not erase her choices. I kept every letter in Samuel's black ledger. I answered none of them, not at first then. One cold February morning I wrote 3 sentences. I am reading your letters. I am not ready to trust you. You may keep writing. That was not forgiveness. It was a door unlocked but not opened. By spring, Whitaker Landing had begun to recover. Boat owners returned when environmental reports cleared our basin. Charter captains brought new customers. The rebuilt eastern seawall stood 3 feet higher. Reinforced by flexible joints Mara insisted we install after reviewing Samuel's plans. Mara became permanent chair of our independent safety board. She accepted only after demanding written authority to overrule me during environmental emergencies. Then she placed my freezer bag inside a frame and hung it in the safety office. Beneath it, a brass plaque read, "Information is not evidence." I considered firing her. The worker council voted against me. That was when I knew the trust was functioning properly. The most important change began in the old storage shed Grant had planned to demolish. We repaired the roof, installed workbenches, and converted it into the Samuel Whitaker Marine Apprenticeship Center. Local students could train in engine repair, marine electrical systems, fiberglass work, environmental safety, and dock operations while earning wages. Ben Ortiz became our first apprentice. He tried to refuse special treatment. I told him surviving attempted murder did not qualify him to skip examinations. He passed everyone. On the morning the program opened, I found him beside an old harbor piling near Sea Pier. The wood was scarred by storms, boat hooks, fuel lines, and 40 years of changing water. He was studying the pale horizontal marks near its base. "What do you see?" I asked. "Old tide stains. That is what they are. It is not what they tell you." He crouched and ran one finger near the highest line without touching it. "That the water reached farther during the storm." And he studied the piling again. The darker mark came later, different sediment. I smiled. Good. The first group of apprentices waited behind us, carrying notebooks. I pointed toward the stain Grant's first manufactured spill had left before the contaminated section was cleaned and sealed. "Water records what happens around it," I said, "but it does not explain the record for you. You have to understand the wind, the current, the material, and the people involved. One mark can tell the truth. It can also tempt you into the wrong story." Ben looked toward the marina. Workers were opening the repair bays, engines turned over along the docks. A charter captain argued cheerfully with Dana about an unpaid winter invoice. Mara stood outside the safety office, holding a clipboard and watching me. The place was noisy again, alive again. A familiar car stopped near the main gate. Elise stepped out carrying a box filled with donated work gloves for the apprenticeship program. She did not walk toward me. She delivered the box to Dana, signed the volunteer log, and began helping arrange tables. She had learned that returning was not something she could demand. It was something she had to earn in small, ordinary acts. Ben noticed me watching her. "Are you going to talk to her?" "Not this morning," he nodded. I looked across Samuel's harbor as sunlight spread over the water. For years, I had believed preserving his legacy meant preventing anything from changing. I had been wrong. A harbor survives because it changes with pressure without surrendering its foundation. The tide rose around the old piling, covering some marks and revealing others. It did not erase where the water had been. It simply made room for where it was going next. If this story reminded you that patience is not weakness, and family is proven through action, not words, thank you for listening. My name is Nora Whitaker, and Whitaker Landing was open for another working day.